This is Amelia Boone. She's Batman, Superman, Superwoman, all rolled into one. You just heard that phenomenal intro. And I think a lot of people see these Tough Mudders and the Spartan races as sort of that photograph on Instagram at the finish line with your face caked in mud and all of that. But just explain to people, if you haven't heard of it, what are some of the obstacles that you are overcoming in these races physically?
Physically, yeah. It's interesting. A lot of people are like, so you've heard of a Tough Mudder or a Spartan? They're like, yeah, you can compete in that? I'm like, yeah, you can. But for those of you who may be unfamiliar, it's basically you're running, distances from 3 miles to the longest event we have is 24 hours. And you're jumping and you're crawling under things and you're crawling under barbed wire and you're climbing ropes and you're carrying buckets up a mountain full of rocks. So it's pretty much, it's very primal. It's whatever, can be thrown at you, and then you're doing it as fast as you can.
I've been interviewing people for a long time, especially athletes. They always say, go with the simplest question. Why?
Good question. It's interesting. I actually didn't start, it's a fairly new sport. It's been around for 5-6 years at this point. I didn't start until I was 28. I was a first-year associate at a large law firm in Chicago. And I think at that point, I went out and ran it with a bunch of friends, a bunch of coworkers actually, and I felt so alive. There is something so primal and physical about being out there. And I think nowadays we shield ourselves from so much pain and from so much, things. We don't like being uncomfortable. So it was almost this mechanism of feeling alive out there, and I just got hooked.
Let's talk about pain tolerance for a second, because I think yours is obviously the threshold is much higher. But what does it feel like to go through that? How do you push through that kind of pain?
Yeah, it's one of those experiences where your entire body is screaming at you. And that's what's unique about obstacle course racing, is that it's not just running. You go out and you run a marathon, your legs are going to hurt by the end of the day. But you're like, oh, my arms, what do I do with my arms? Here, I mean, literally, like, what do I do with my arms when I'm running? It's an entire body experience. And so it's one of those things where you're just physically and mentally drained by the end.
Yeah. So. I have tons of questions. I can only imagine how many questions you guys have, so get those ready and we'll come to you in just a moment. Recently, though, you have suffered a couple injuries, the knee surgery, which you came back from, but then also a broken femur, and you were really forced to the sidelines for the first time since you started obstacle course racing. What did you learn about yourself? What do you learn about the sport when you're on the sidelines?
Yeah, what's interesting, the thing that's made me very successful at this sport, having a very high tolerance for pain, is also something that led to my downfall, which is, running my way into breaking my femur. So I've been on the sidelines this entire past season, and it's been incredible. What it's taught me is really to experience joy through the success of others and to be someone's biggest fan. I think athletes, their entire identity is wrapped up in being an athlete. And when you can't do that, you lose part of yourself. And your instinct is to go hide your head in the sand and pretend it's not happening. And as much as it was awful to be out there on the sidelines just wanting to compete, what I found was that being part of that community and staying involved was so key to me. And what I learned was there's many different ways to go run these races. And winning a race for somebody doesn't necessarily mean that they're crossing the finish line first. It's your race. Everyone has their own experience out there.
So you're the most decorated obstacle course racer as a female ever, or maybe both genders. You're also a corporate attorney. How do you know when to give up? I mean, how do you know, and how do you process if there's a time when you don't meet your goal?
That's interesting. I'm not quite sure giving up is in my vocabulary, because I'm kind of hard-headed, as I'm sure a lot of women out here are. But I think a lot of this is, a lot in life, is facing those failures and realizing that at some point you are going to come up short. But you don't learn any lessons when you fail. And we've talked about that. There's so much beauty in the struggle. and being knocked down a peg and learning from that. And that's really where you grow as a person, and that's where people identify with you. And that's one thing I've learned from being on the sidelines this entire past year, is that exposing that vulnerability and exposing that, hey, I struggle too, and this isn't all roses, and I'm not just out there dominating everything in life. And that's very relatable.
It seems like after you do a 24-hour race, or there used to be something called a death race that I found out recently. It was like 72 hours in the middle of Vermont in the winter. Amelia can tell you more about that, but it seems like coming back to the office on Monday morning would seem kind of anticlimactic. What does the law side give you? I mean, you could be just a professional obstacle course racer. You could be a spokesperson, a brand ambassador. You could make a living that way. Why do you keep wanting to practice law?
I found that I function the best when I have multiple balls in the air, when I'm juggling a number of things and when I'm busy. And what I found, the law to me provides a mental stimulus that's different than being out there racing as an athlete, which is actually very mentally taxing. Endurance racing, the first 12 hours are physical, the next 12, 14 hours are all mental. So your body is going to give out before your mind gives out. So I think for me, it's just, I don't like to identify myself as one thing. When I go around, when somebody asks me what I do, it's a very hard question. I'm like, I'm a full-time attorney and a full-time athlete. But I like having those both sides. And to me, that creates, it just makes me feel very well-rounded.
Yeah. I read something where you said, a race, you call yourself a notoriously slow starter in these races, because you say the race isn't going to be won in the first 8 hours. It's not going to be even won in the first 12 hours. Do you apply that same long view to the rest of your life? Are you able to use that same philosophy when it comes to your corporate life too?
Yeah, I try to carry it over. I think there's a lot, we can get into metaphors and whatnot between racing and life, but there's a lot of carryover between the two. And I think that people often focus on the here and the now and the what can I fix, and everything is going wrong. Whereas I try and take a step back always and look down the road and kind of look at the whole picture. And that definitely for me has helped pace myself, because I'll jump into something and I'll get all flustered and then just step back.
Yeah, it's not one in the first 8 hours or 12. Any questions out there? Get them ready for Amelia. There's one right over here.
Yes, I wondered if you could describe your training schedule and when you do your training around your full-time job.
Yeah, so I'm a notoriously early riser. I've always been a morning person, but I'm up at around 4 to 4:30 in the morning. And I found that if I put off training till the end of the day, I know that, work can get in the way, emails will come up, clients will reach out, and that I won't always have that time. I know nobody's going to be looking for me at 5 o'clock in the morning. So that's where I get in the majority of my training. And people always wonder, how do you have time? And it's not always a perfect fit, but I've really found that if you have passion for something, you make the time. And so I have these passion for these two facets in my life, and it doesn't feel like a chore. To me, that's, I make sacrifices elsewhere, but I'm able to juggle those two because I love them so much.
What are some of the other sacrifices?
I mean, social life isn't always the best. I'll be totally honest. When you have to get up and run 30 miles for a training run, you're not going to be out heavily boozing the night before, or maybe you are. I mean, that's some people function better that way. But to me, it doesn't feel like a sacrifice, because I feel like, I'm redefining and reframing what it means to have it all for me. And those are the things that are important to me right now. And they can shift later on in life. And that's great that we have the ability to pivot and we have the ability to reinvent ourselves. I didn't start racing until I was 28, until I was an attorney already. And that was a reinvention for me.
Yeah. I also love that you eat Pop-Tarts and donuts and stuff. You're not crazy.
I never ask anybody. I'm like, don't ask me about my diet, because you don't want to follow it.
I think we have another question here. Go ahead.
Hi there. I just started doing Spartans last year, so I've done 3. And it's just amazing, like how many people you see there, but yet how many people don't know about it. And I think what you talked about, the primal and just taking you out of your everyday life, it's been great. I was just curious what obstacle for you was like the hardest. I'm still trying to learn how to climb the rope. It's really hard, so I had to do burpees for that one. But what was the hardest physical obstacle that you?
Yeah, I am notoriously awful at the spear throw. So if anybody has seen this, you basically take a spear and you throw it and you have to stick into a bale of hay. Totally natural. I grew up playing softball, and I was a pitcher, so I was like, I got this, no problem. No problem. No, it's not at all like throwing a softball. It's more like throwing a dart. So that's always been kind of my Achilles heel. But that's what's great about this, and most people will go out to these races and they'll fail miserably, and then they'll be like, whatever, I wasn't good at that. But it gives you something to work on, and it gives you a challenge, so.
We'll be meeting tomorrow at 7 a.m. for spear throwing.
Right.
Anybody?
I'm not good with the lethal weapons, so.
Stay out of the way. I think we have one over here too. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Kimberly. I work at UBS, and I was in the gym this morning, and I have to say, your body is amazing. And my question is, that push-up you were doing, it was quick down and up. How do you do that?
Let's do it, Amelia.
Lots of training. Do we want to?
Let's do it. Amazing. Oh my gosh. In the heels. I'll clap for that. Sorry to put you on the spot there. I knew you could do it. We don't have a lot of time left here, so I do want to talk to you about one thing, which is both of these trades, obstacle course racing, also being an attorney at Apple, really male dominated. And I'm curious to know, when you first got into the obstacle course racing and you're beating the men, you're passing them on the course, what's the response to you?
So it's interesting. I have this story. In 2012, World's Toughest Mudder, there were about 1,000 competitors, and I think only about 100 of us were women. And you're running through the night. This is New Jersey in the middle of December, and it's about 20 degrees, and everyone's wearing wetsuits because it's the only way you'll survive, because you're in and out of water. Everyone looks the same in a wetsuit. And so I was passing all these guys, and like, go, dude, you got it, dude. I'm like, thank you. And they're like, oh my God, that's a woman. And it's amazing. Like 5 years ago or so, there was a lot of kind of shock and awe and resistance. A lot of men didn't like the idea that they were being quote unquote chicked by a woman. They would almost kind of like shove you out of the way or try to elbow you out of the way. And now it's surprising the amount of support, and guys who, I wasn't able to run World's Toughest Mudder this past year because of my injury. But all these guys were like, we're going to miss you lapping us out there, So I've seen a culture shift, and it's actually very encouraging.
Yeah. This is awful. Well, we are actually out of time. So sorry about that. I know that Amelia's, she'll be around answering your questions. Thank you so much. You're so inspirational. I can't figure you out, but I love it. Love it.